I went to IIM Lucknow and I graduated from there in 1997.
You were running a
And
SaaS company as your first entrepreneurial venture 25 years ago before anyone knew what SaaS is.
फॉरगेट अबाउट गुड वैल्यू प्रोपोजिशन। घर चलाने जितने तो पैसे नहीं होंगे। अगर आपने 10,000 कॉपी बेची है लास्ट 5 साल में, 20 रुपए पर कॉपी मिलता है, तो दैट इज व्हाट 2 लाख रुपए।
मैं सड़क पे नहीं आऊँगा, मतलब जॉब गई तो ठीक है, एटलीस्ट अपना खाना पीना तो चलते रहेगा. When I got out of engineering, I wanted to get into management, but when I got into management, I said I don't want to totally leave my technical area. I don't want to sell soap and stuff like that,
If it is Indian customers, then how did 9/11 affect you so badly?
नहीं रंजित, देखो थोड़ी कंट्रोवर्सी क्रिएट करनी पड़ेगी। इट्स नॉट फॉर अ चैनल, इट्स फॉर सेलिंग योर बुक्स।
कि चुप हो जा कि क्या हमें पिटवाएगा। Hello and welcome to one more episode of IIM Baad. This is episode 41. So a big congratulations to us for having made it to 41 episodes. We are nearing our half century. But I wanted to say this. This is our first episode which we are doing after crossing 5,000 subscribers. Now, for some channels, 5,000 subscribers might not be a huge achievement, but we think when we started out, we thought even 5 people see our channel, that's a major achievement. And here we are at 5,000 in just about a year and a bit. So, yes, thank you everyone who's watching this. Thank you everyone who's subscribed. And if you haven't, you know what to do. Press the subscription and the bell icon for notification. So as you know, this is Manish Miglani, usually called Migs in short, and that is Vikas Kedia, usually called Vix in short. But today, right in the middle, we have Ranjit Kulkarni. And I will let Ranjit introduce himself beyond. What I'm going to tell you is Ranjit comes with a huge, not just number of years of work experience after IIM, nearly, definitely more than 25, maybe short of 30, Ranjit, if I'm not mistaken. But more importantly, he's got one of the most diverse experiences that one can imagine after IIM. So, as IIM graduates, a lot of the common professions that people do, which some of it even Ranjit has done, which is when people go into tech, people go into consulting, people go into banking, and so on. But Ranjit is an author and publisher of note. So I will let Ranjit take the baton and tell us a bit more about yourself, Ranjit.
sure, thanks Mix and thanks Bix for having me on the episode today. Uh, just briefly, and thanks for all the kind words. Yeah, I passed out of IIM almost 28 years back, and I've spent more than 2 decades, maybe around 23 or 22, 23 years in the corporate environment in various settings, from startups to large MNCs, from largely in IT services and consulting. Uh, Most of my first half of my career was spent in software consulting, and the next half was primarily around data analytics and AI. Uh, Worked with large number of companies and large companies in various consulting roles. And over the last 5 or 6 years, I have been a full-time author of fiction largely and also non-fiction. Uh, I have been a writer for longer than that, but I took the plunge into being an author around 5 years back. So most of my writing is inspired by my real life experiences in the real world of work and life, basically. So that's what I currently do. So that's broadly about what I have done over the last 27, 28 years after I am.
And you went to IIM Bangalore, correct, Ranjit?
I went to IIM Lucknow. I
Lucknow.
went to IIM Lucknow, and I graduated from there in 1997.
Perfect, perfect.
So 1995 to 97, you were in Lucknow, in IIM Lucknow. Ranjit, where are you originally from? And tell us a bit about pre-Lucknow. Where did you grow up and what you did before IIM?
Sure. So I am originally from Mumbai. So I was born and brought up in Mumbai. I did my schooling in Mumbai. Uh, Essentially, till plus two, I was in Mumbai. Uh, and I lived in Villeparle. That was most of the time that I spent my childhood there, typically in middle class surroundings. Uh, and I went to REC Warangal. Now it's NIT Warangal. At that time, it was Regional Engineering College Warangal, and I did my BTech in Computer Science there. And that was my pre IIM stint, kind of engineering. And then, like a lot of engineers at that time, I think the basic idea was either go to the US or go to IIM. So I chose to go to IIM after that, and that's how my journey into management and consulting began in around 1995. Yeah.
So Ranjit, Warangal, how far is it from Mumbai?
Oh, it's I don't know exactly in terms of kilometers, but it used to be, and those were train times. So it
Yeah.
we went to Hyderabad by train, which was around 18 or 20 hours, and most of the time the train was late. So it generally took 21
Yes.
hours, and then there was a connecting
Yes, that's
train.
what I was thinking. I mean, more in terms of the distance, or rather in terms of the time taking from Mumbai to Warangal, and that too in the early 90s,
Yeah,
when the train speeds as well as connectivities
yeah.
wasn't as good as it is today.
There was just one direct train, which was Konark Express, I remember, which went all the way to Bhubaneswar via Hyderabad. So that was, but we didn't always get tickets on those. So most of the times we had to take a train to Hyderabad and then change to something else. So it was around 20 hours at the bare minimum and 24 hours in most regular times. That's what it used to take to go to Warangal.
And so everything was slow at that time because I used to be in Calcutta and I used to go to Delhi by different trains from Calcutta to Delhi. The fastest was Rajdhani that used to take around 20 hours, but then non-Rajdhani trains were like 30 hours or so. But somehow it seemed like life had more time in it. And now everything is faster. I can go from California to Calcutta in 24 hours, but it seems like life has less time in it. Is it just a factor of growing old, or is it something to do with our society today?
I think it's a factor of both, growing old, but as students, I mean, I think we have a lot more time. I mean, obviously, when you're studying and then you have batchmates and classmates and roommates traveling with you. So we were, I think, around 6 or 8 of us from Bombay. And then there were a couple of others from other places in Maharashtra used to join the train somewhere in the middle. So those memories, basically we spent 18 hours every in the train every, let's say, 3 4 months, either going to Warangal or kind of coming back to home. Uh, so those are really memories that one cherishes, and great friendships get formed in that time. Yeah,
What did you do in those 24 hours? मुझे याद है बचपन में हम तो अंताक्षरी खेलते थे
yeah,
क्योंकि
yeah.
बैठे बैठे क्या करें करना है कुछ का.
This was not just Antakshari. I mean, we had everything from Antakshari to debates on, various things in college, and then about life and,
और
what
वो
to do next.
स्टेशन पे उतर के चाय पीना और
हाँ हाँ, स्टेशन पे
किताबें
उतर के
खरीदना.
कर्ड राइस खाना.
हाँ.
That was because in South India, that was kind of once you cross Maharashtra and get into Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka, it was
Hmm.
all rice, and we weren't used to it at that time. So
Yeah.
so all of us kind of uh, had a taste, especially I think it was Wadi Junction or both at Hyderabad and Wadi. We had this specific requirement that we had to get down, get some curd rice, and kind of share it in us.
बट रंजीत मुंबई में तो फिर भी बहुत चावल चलता है. See, I am
Huh?
from Delhi. The first
Compared
time
to
I
Delhi,
landed
yes.
in Bangalore, I was like कि कितना चावल खाओगे यार, मतलब लाइफ में और भी कुछ खाने को दो, रोटी तो दो.
बिल्कुल, बिल्कुल। तो मुंबई में फिर भी चलता है, यू आर राइट। आई वाज़ काइंड ऑफ इन द मिडल, राइट, ऑफ नॉर्थ एंड साउथ। सो in a Maharashtrian meal,
Hmm.
you have both rice and chapati. So whereas you go a bit south, you have mostly rice, and then you go a bit north, like even Gujarat or Madhya Pradesh or
Hmm.
above, it's all roti. I was in the middle, so I didn't have a lot of adjustment to do, but there is still quite a lot in terms of
So,
really.
so while it may not be a culture shock, but it was definitely a changed culture from Mumbai to Andhra to Warangal,
Yes,
and as an 18-year-old,
yes,
usually I think as an 18-year-old it's easier to adjust than it is when you're like once you're 30 or 40 or 50.
I think so. I think so. These kind of changes, you don't really realize it at that time because you are basically going there thinking that okay, I'm going to get a computer science degree, and I'm going to stay in a hostel and all. But it's quite a big change. And when I like, for example, when you become a parent and you realize that your child is kind of going to go somewhere, that's when you realize actually there's quite a bit of a change, especially parents at that time who didn't have a lot of distance was large at that time, right? I mean, you didn't have the kind of WhatsApp communication and things like that. We, STD phone calls and all those kind of things. So
वो एसटीडी के लिए लाइन लगाना पड़ता था ना.
सिर्फ लाइन नहीं लगाना पड़ता था, वहां पे एक तो स्क्रीन होती थी जो दिखाते रहती थी कि कितने सेकंड और कितने रुपए लगे. एंड द मनी यूज
हाँ.
टू ग्रो फास्टर देन द सेकंड. सेकंड दो
yes,
रुपए तीन, सेकंड तीन तो 4 रुपए हो गए. सो इट वाज, मैंने पहले
yeah,
से
there
सोच
were
रखे थे
specific
20 रुपए का
times of
बजट
the
है.
day.
हाँ. हाँ,
मतलब वो
शाम के
शाम
समय
को या रात
आफ्टर
को
8 ओ
फोन करो
क्लॉक.
तो सस्ता
हाँ,
होता था,
सस्ता हो
समथिंग
जाता
लाइक
था.
दैट.
हाँ.
Yeah, yeah,
हाँ.
yeah.
What days, right?
Right.
So you reached Warangal, you reached REC or NIT as it's called now. Uh, फिर क्या हुआ? As in, you made friends. I'm guessing, obviously, you made a lot of friends. 4 साल. Tell us something interesting. 4 years में क्या क्या हुआ?
So 4 years, mein, I think the obviously apart from the friends and the studies and all, I think somewhere around second year I kind of realized that I don't want to spend my time as a techie all my life as a techie. Like a lot of
सेकेंड
engineers.
ईयर में ही पता चल गया.
हाँ, सेकेंड ईयर के एंड तक मुझे समझ गया था कि ये कुछ लग नहीं रहा है खास ठीक से, कुछ और ढूंढना पड़ेगा. एंड लॉट ऑफ एंड दैट टाइम, आई मीन, द एंटायर वेव ऑफ .com and all was just about to start, and actually there was an opportunity to go to the US as a techie and stuff like that. So that time I basically, interesting part was that I used to be fairly active in some of the other, the debating and the quizzing and music as well. I was a tabla player as well. And some of those things we had management aptitude tests and all. So that's what I gave in my third year, and that's when I realized that I think we basically, if I don't want to spend my time as a techie, as a career as a techie, then I need a master's degree in management, and then obviously the best place in India to get is to get into IIM. So and it was a fairly I think the a lot of people at that time basically realized that there's IIT and IIM thing, which at that time used to be some kind of a passport to a decent life. So I thought, okay, I think the best way is to kind of try and get into an IIM as far as possible.
So Warangal में you were able. Did you know about IIMs? Well, and I'm just trying to place. So this was in 94 or 95, right? Yeah, when you were giving the cat, और उस time पर तो इतना ज़्यादा IIMs weren't big, or rather they weren't as popular. I mean, if you knew, you knew, but it wasn't like everyone.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't like mainstream in the sense that okay, everyone is doing it. So you're right. But I think in our college we had some of these aptitude tests and all. And while not a lot of people, it was still a technical institution. So the primary, engineering made a primary goal is obviously a lot of people want to take a job immediately after that. But the others who want to study further is primarily either an MTech or an MS. So that was the majority of the even some of my professors were like, okay, why do you want to get into management? That kind of a thing. So in computer science especially. So but I did find out, and I realized that I think the IITs were much more popular actually. IITs were much more mainstream. JE was a big deal, but CAT wasn't. But somewhere in around the third year I realized that I think that is another option. So that's where I started exploring and preparing myself for it.
See, because if you think about it historically, or at least in the last 50 or 80 years, people growing up in India back then, 70s, 80s, 90s, what was it? कि बेटा बेटी इंजीनियर बनेंगे या डॉक्टर बनेंगे,
Right.
राइट? कोई कोई ये नहीं बोलता था कि हम मैनेजमेंट करेंगे.
Correct.
इट वाज इंजीनियर डॉक्टर,
Yes. Yes.
राइट? और अगर इंजीनियर डॉक्टर नहीं है तो फिर यूपीएससी होता था.
Ah.
बट एमबीए करेंगे नहीं था. Unlike today MBA everyone does it, and
Yes.
in a way it's a finishing education.
Yes.
Whatever you've done, you can be a doctor, you can still do an MBA, you can be an engineer, you can still do an MBA, because everything is somewhere or the other it will become a commerce.
That's right.
Even डॉक्टर अगर अपना क्लिनिक चलाता है, थोड़ा बहुत तो उसको P&L और बिजनेस सेंस होनी चाहिए.
Right, right. So you're right. At that time, it wasn't as mainstream as it is now. But I think, especially in I don't know about. I think around even in that time, majority of the engineering colleges still had that as one offshoot. Because I realized that even in my batch at IIM, 80% of my batchmates were engineers. Either most of them either from IIT, RECs, or any other state engineering colleges and things like that. So somehow in engineering that had started taking root. We had only four IIMs at that time, A, B, C, and L. So maybe the competition was lesser as well. But most of the competition was again the engineers. Yeah.
Yes, you're basically competing against your classmates. You're competing against similar engineers from other institutes. So, did you prepare together with your hostel classmates? How did you do it back then? Because it's been a long time, 30 plus years.
Not really. I was mostly a loan preparation kind of a person. Some of especially for the written part of the test. Once you qualified for that and then you came to the GD and interview, then there was some common preparation. But for the actual test, so there used to be this IMS. I don't know whether they're still there. They
Yeah,
used
I
to send
studied
these
IMS.
packets.
I'm a
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. The
Yes,
the,
They
the
we've
used to
all
pages
done
send
आते
those
थे
books
IMS
yellow.
by
back in the
post.
90s.
अरे जो
Yeah.
पेजेस आते थे वो येलो होते थे, पता नहीं, I don't
येलो
know why
होते
the
थे
they
एग्जैक्टली.
come yellow
सो
paper. Yeah.
तो वो पोस्ट से आते थे एंड दैट
Okay.
हैड स्टडी लेसन्स एंड ऑल एंड सो मोस्ट ऑफ माय probably the end of third year and the first half of my final year were primarily, I had basically said that manage my computer classes, computer subjects, just about manage them, but then focus most of my activity on that. So it's fairly focused at that time also because I knew that this is what I, had to do. So I think I was mostly preparing on my own. I mean, sitting in my hostel room
Okay.
and kind of doing all those tests and things like that. Yeah.
For the first time now I've known कि उसके पेजेस ओरिजिनली येलो होते थे. क्योंकि मैंने तो किसी से
Were they
सेकंड थर्ड हैंड
originally
खरीदे थे,
yellow?
मुझे
I,
लगा था
I
कि
don't
इसलिए
remember.
येलो है.
नहीं, जब जब किताब आई थी पहली बार मेल में, then it was less yellow, but then it faded and became more
हाँ.
yellow over time.
More and more yellow.
Significantly faster than regular books, because देखो regular books भी फेड करती
Right.
हैं, पर वो slowly, मैं 10 साल लगते हैं वो 3 महीने में ही पता नहीं what they had done. It faded very fast.
Right, right.
Yes, yes. So you did everything. कुछ interview preparation किया, and how was it? Tell us about your experience writing CAT. Do you even remember it?
Yeah, so it was basically there was a bunch of our, there was a bunch of people, very few, I think 10 or 15 folks who were seriously preparing for CAT when I was in my batch basically. And there were one or two seniors who had done it earlier. So basically, we used to get together and have some discussions around. They used to tell us, okay, the Hindu was very popular in the South, so they used to tell us read the Hindu editorials. Be aware of what's happening in the world around you. Economic Times के subscriptions suddenly बढ़ने लगे.
Ranjit, I grew up in Delhi. हमको भी बोलते थे कि हिंदू पढ़ो. Do you know why? Because it was a South Indian newspaper, so the English was supposedly better in the Hindu than the Indian English जो हिंदुस्तान टाइम्स और टाइम्स ऑफ इंडिया में आ चुकी थी already. And obviously, and for things like that, मतलब if you can afford it, then read the Economist. बट अगर नहीं है, अगर इंडियन ही न्यूज़पेपर पढ़ना है, तो हिंदू में थोड़ी इंग्लिश ज़्यादा होती है।
Correct. And I actually used to, I mean, I used to be a Times of India person till I was in Mumbai, because Mumbai is all Times. When I went to college, it was largely Hindu that was more popular there. And I actually noticed some
एंड
differences.
आई ऑल्सो रिमेंबर,
Yeah.
जब मैंने हिंदू पढ़ना शुरू किया, मैं से आधे वर्ड मुझे लगता था मैं इंग्लिश में ना बहुत ही तोप हूँ। फिर वो आधे वो अजीब-अजीब वर्ड्स यूज़ कर रहे थे, व्हिच आई जस्ट कुडन्ट I didn't know what these words were. I think that's how I improved my vocabulary. And now that I reflect back,
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
think some of those words should have been used in a newspaper.
Yeah.
Anyway,
नहीं, ऐसे ऐसे क्या words थे that should not have been used in a newspaper, Miglani? What do you mean by that?
यार न्यूज़पेपर इज़ फॉर रीडिंग एंड गेटिंग अ न्यूज़, राइट? इट इज़ नॉट लाइक वो रेन एंड मार्टिन बुक होती थी। वो मतलब वो ऐसे लगता था कि किसी ने ना उस वाली बुक खोल के रखी। एंड आई टेल यू दिस इज़ माय रिकलेक्शन व्हेन आई स्टार्टेड रीडिंग द इकोनॉमिस्ट, to improve that, to get that added English and especially grammar and reading comprehension के लिए मैंने इकोनॉमिस्ट पढ़ना शुरू किया था कि समझ तो आए, मतलब प्रॉपर फास्टली इंग्लिश कैसे करते हैं। दे यूज्ड good words, obviously UK British magazine thi, and they've got a very good sense of writing English, but they didn't unnecessarily use ki matlab ki kuch okay, this is like a ऐसे लगता था कि वो अमिताभ बच्चन, वो कौन-सा गाना था, जक्स्टापोज़िशन ऑफ दिस एंड दिस, माय नेम इज़ एंथोनी गोंजाल्वेस। मुझे ऐसे ऐसे अब लग रहा है कि हिंदू में ना उस लेवल के वर्ड्स फालतू में डाले जाते थे। बट बट पढ़ा है, हम सबने पढ़ा है, एंड दिस इज़ हाउ अ लॉट ऑफ दोज़ वर्ड्स जो कैट में आते हैं कि इसका मतलब क्या है, वो हमने तो सीख लिए।
I actually was very much. I mean, English and maths were some of my, they were basically my favorite subjects. And obviously now that I'm a writer, now I realize that I used to even like English as much as maths at that time, because it was also engineering and science focused. We focused too much on mathematics, but so easily I used to just love the Hindu op-eds, and the central section of Hindu at that time. And especially on Sundays, they have the magazine that they have, which is largely literature focused and stuff like that. So I used to really like it. I never found it very bombastic, but now when you talk about it, अभी मुझे लगता है कि for a, otherwise it was sometimes too verbose than was necessary. Now that you talk about it, but their opinions, I used to really love to read them, basically. Yeah.
हुँ, गुड, गुड। एंड
यार तुमने
इंटरव्यू
जो रेन
प्रिपरेशन
एंड
कुछ करी
मार्टिन,
या ऐसे ही पहुँच गए?
नहीं मिलानी, just I don't think we'll ever discuss Ren and Martin on an IIM Baad podcast in 2025. So I
वो
have to
रेड
take
कवर
the
होता था।
challenge. That come out. That was the book I hated the
बिल्कुल।
most. I just
आई
did not.
एक्चुअली लव दैट बुक।
I
आई
just
लव
did
दैट
not
बुक।
get English grammar. I think कि कोई grammar का question आता था, I should read the sentence in my head. And the boy hit the ball that went over the girl. The boy hit a ball that went over the girl. अच्छा, the ball होगा
हाँ,
कि
yeah,
a
actually
ball होगा?
your example is
I
right,
should
huh?
read it in my head. And then, yeah, which one is sounding right? You could never open that book. That's just not my personality. I just gave up.
I'll tell you, if there is ever a book that has improved my grammar
Hmm.
in English, it is रेन एंड मार्टिन, क्योंकि मैंने वो, एक तो मुझे अच्छी लगती थी, और ऊपर से आई वाज काइंड ऑफ गुड एट द ग्रामर, एंड
So,
इन
so
माय
let me tell
स्कूल
you, ये
तो थोड़ा-सा उस
podcast
पे
चल
ज़्यादा
क्यों रहा है
फोकस था।
after 1.5 years, because we are so very different. तुझे रेन एंड मार्टिन अच्छी लगती थी और मुझे लगता था कि मुझे गोली मार दो, but I'm not gonna open that book. There was another book, बहुत पतली सी किताब होती थी सीबीएसई में ग्रामर सिखाने के लिए, उसको कहते थे ब्रिटानिका या ब्रिटेन, but it's this some book. I hope Kulkarni or Miglani remembers. But इंग्लिश ग्रामर सिखाने के लिए वो
मैं
थोड़ी
रेन
बहुत।
एंड मार्टिन से पढ़ी है ब्रिक्स, आई हैव टू से दिस। बट
Yeah.
यू मेड अ वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग पॉइंट is and that kind of, in my view, goes to the heart of our channel, is when we are talking to Ranjit today, when we are talking to different people from different IIMs, from different batches, why are we doing this? Is our aim is to show that हर टाइप के लोग होते हैं आईएम में, हर टाइप के लोग सक्सेसफुली पहुंचते हैं आईएम, और हर टाइप के लोग आईएम के बाद भी सक्सेसफुल होते हैं.
हाँ, तो
देयर
तुम
इज नॉट
कहना
लाइक
चाह रहे
वन
कि रैनन
वन
मार्टिन
साइज फिट्स
पेडिया ने
ऑल.
नहीं पढ़ी, ग्रामर आता नहीं है,
हाँ,
वो
नहीं
फिर
पढ़ी
भी
तो यू आर
पहुंच
स्टिल
गया।
एज सक्सेसफुल और मोर सक्सेसफुल.
Yeah,
दैट्स व्हाट आई एम ट्राइंग टू से,
या
कि अगर नहीं है, एक चीज नहीं है, कुछ और आपने ज्यादा अच्छा करा होगा.
या
एंड दैट इज व्हाट वी आर ट्राइंग टू डू इन दिस चैनल. कि ठीक है, नहीं किया. रंजीत रंजीत ने वो टेक बोट नहीं पकड़ी, एज ही सेइंग, एंड ही वांटेड टू डू एन एमबीए. ही इज सक्सेसफुल इन हिज ओन वे. जिसने टेक बोट, आई एम श्योर सम ऑफ योर क्लासमेट्स, वो अपना उन्होंने कहीं और सक्सेस ढूंढ लिया होगा.
right. Yeah, absolutely. Many shades.
So that is the thing. But Renan Martin, or anyways, I don't want to go into my own stories. उसके लिए बहुत टाइम है और बहुत और एपिसोड्स हैं, थोड़ा थोड़ा कभी कभी बात करेंगे. सो रंजीत, आई वाज आस्किंग यू कि इंटरव्यू के लिए कुछ प्रिपेयर किया, या वो भी यू आर ऑलरेडी गुड एट स्पीकिंग एंड ऑल दैट? इंटरव्यू से ज्यादा एक पहले जीडी होता था, यू रिमेम्बर? इट यूज्ड टू स्केयर द हेल आउट ऑफ मी.
The GD was used to be the scariest part for me because there used to be some preparations that we used to do, and it mostly ended up being a fish market kind of a scenario. 10 लोग बात कर रहे हैं अपने अपने directions में, because everyone was told that you have to say something, and in the effort to say something within those limited 10-15 minutes, everyone kept on saying something. So it was always the scary part for me. And even before the actual GD, I thought that this is going to basically mess me up. The actual interview per se, the one-to-one or the panel interview that some IIMs had, uh, that on its own was fairly okay, because we had a lot of, like, actually what happens is थर्ड ईयर के एंड को, फाइनल ईयर जब चालू होता है, तब जॉब इंटरव्यूज भी चालू होते थे तभी. तो काफी जॉब इंटरव्यूज भी मतलब became some kind of a practice, before you get to the CAT interview, which typically happens in the end of the final year, right? So by which time most people have gone through a certain number of job interviews. So job interviews का काफी practice होने की वजह से the interview per se I was fairly okay, but the GD is what I've never been able to. Even at that time, I always felt that this is going to be kind of your Achilles heel, in the sense that ये थोड़ा सा I'll basically wait for my chance, and that chance will never come. That was my feeling when I got into the GDs, all the GDs basically. Yeah, yeah.
एंड लेटर ऑन आई रियलाइज कि उस टाइम पे मुझे भी ऐसे लगता था. लेटर ऑन आई रियलाइज दैट एवरीवन एल्स इज इन द सेम
Same
बोट.
boat.
कि सभी, मतलब मे बी एक दो लोग थे जो जिनको पता था, बट
Uh,
everyone is in the same boat. That is why it became a fish market,
yeah.
because everyone came in thinking, I'll never get a chance to speak, so let me just blurt it
Right,
out.
right, right. And it was all unmoderated.
मैंने भी किया था वो.
I don't know how it is
मैंने भी वो
now.
किया था.
Yeah.
प्रैक्टिस जीडी में मैंने किया था, एंड देन समवन टोल्ड मी, बॉस ये तुम्हारे बस का नहीं है.
Uh,
तुम एक काम करो, तुम ना सिर्फ, तुम्हारे बस का सिर्फ एक रोल है, अगर तुम वो कर सकते हो, वरना तुम ऐसे नहीं बोल पाओगे. एंड दैट वाज कि तुम ना बाकी सबका सुन लो, तुम्हें आधी चीजें तो पता ही नहीं है कि कौन सा टॉपिक डिस्कस कर रहे हैं. ऑब्वियसली द पर्सन आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट सेड इट वेरी पोलाइटली. इज लाइक, तुम और कुछ नहीं कर पाओगे, तुम ना बाकियों का सुनो, नोट्स बनाओ, और एंड में ना ज्ञानी बाबा की तरह बोल देना कि अच्छा अब मैं बताता हूँ, ये लोग ऐसे बोल रहे हैं, वो लोग ऐसे बोल रहे हैं, तो मतलब.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. मतलब वो भी एक तरीका है कुछ बात करने का, because otherwise it was always difficult to barge in, and obviously personalities अलग अलग होते हैं लोगों के, तो किसी को कुछ अच्छा लगता
नहीं,
है.
मेरे साथ तो और चैलेंज था कि मेरे को ना वो हिंदू और ये सब पढ़ने के बावजूद मेरे को ना आधे टॉपिक्स का पता ही नहीं था कि ये लाइफ में, दुनिया में क्या चल रहा है, और किस टाइप के आईएम में जीडी, वो प्रैक्टिस जीडी में जब हो रहा था. And, मतलब द पर्सन आई वाज गेटिंग कोच विद सेड कि बॉस, तुम्हारे पास का नहीं है, तुम्हारे पास ना अब 2 हफ्ते बचे हैं, तुम पढ़ ही नहीं पाओगे, तुम छोड़ दो, तुमने 18 साल में नहीं पढ़ा है, 20 साल में नहीं पढ़ा है, तुम दो दो हफ्ते में तो नहीं पढ़ पाओगे.
So
Right.
Meghani and Kulkarni, I'll share, Mix and Kulkarni, I'll share with you guys one embarrassing story of my group discussion and interview, and it follows on the same theme कि इतने बड़े में भी IIM पहुंच सकते हो, और you know,
यार ये बीप, आप नोट टू द एडिटर,
हाँ,
प्लीज बीप इट,
हाँ,
वरना हमारा चैनल ना वो एडल्ट चैनल के उसमें आ जाएगा.
हाँ, and not only IIM में पहुंच सकते हो, I was part of DML, then I've come to the US, and था मैं, editor will take care of it. तो मुझसे इंटरव्यू में पूछा गया which language is spoken in Bangalore. So you're applying, मैंने, you're here for interview at IIM Bangalore के interview में हो. If you come to Bangalore, what language is most predominantly spoken in Bangalore? I was like, my God, मुझे नहीं पता था जवाब क्या है. And I said,
बैंगलोरियन नहीं बोला,
जी
बैंगलोरियन.
बैंगलोरियन में कन्नड़ा बोलना चाहिए था. कन्नड़ा तो पता ही नहीं था. And मैं just imagine कि how bad you can be in general knowledge if you graduate from Sri Ram College of Commerce. You are uh, 21 years old at that time, and you don't know what language is spoken in Karnataka. And I said, some South Indian language. And then I started laughing, but I was so embarrassed. So one of the things that happens, even my wife tells me, is, I'm shouting at you, and why are you laughing? I said, "Okay, that's my embarrassment response. When I'm embarrassed, I laugh." And I just started laughing. And the next thing I know, the two professors started laughing too. ये कितना बड़ा बेवकूफ आया है हमारे साथ.
Yeah, it's embarrassing, but it's not surprising, honestly. I mean, there was this notion, especially for people in the north, that anything below
Yes,
Mumbai is South Indian, Madrasi or
yes,
something. So
yes,
till as early as even the early 2000s, a lot of people didn't know there are five states, but four states at
yes,
that time and four different languages.
yes,
So
yes.
because of I having stayed in the south
And
during my
Ranjit,
BTech,
one
at
thing
least
a
I
lot
knew.
of younger viewers don't realize. I think one thing a lot of younger viewers don't realize is that we didn't have Google in the 90s. Our general knowledge was very much local knowledge. If you've never seen something, if you've never visited a place which is like 2000 miles away, how will you know what language? किसी ना कोई आपको पढ़ा थोड़ी ना रहा है. And India is a land of so many cultures. I'll tell you, when I grew up in Delhi, for me, going to Mussoorie or going to Shimla in the holidays was like Uttaranchal is a different culture, Himachal is a different culture. That itself was a different thing for me, new thing
Milani,
for me.
absolutely
But
correct. But there's some other value to take from this. Most of us, we assume that we need to be way more smarter to get anywhere in life than we actually need to be. Most of it is just applying, just showing up and just doing your work. Because मैंने अगर इंटरव्यू के पहले या बाद में मुझे पूछा जाए कि किसी लड़के को ये भी नहीं पता कि वो पहुंच जाएगा IIM, मैं बोलूंगा पहुंचेगा नहीं, नहीं, पहुंच ही नहीं सकता. राइट. But most of us are we don't need as much as we imagine we need.
I mean, most of the reason for getting in was largely, as he said, showing up in the sense that you just do whatever you can for preparation, basically, because you don't need extraordinary brilliance of any kind. Yeah, you basically turn up. Yeah.
And Ranjit, how is Lucknow? Did you enjoy the city itself?
The city itself, I mean, the campus was fairly away from the city, like most times, I think, at that time. Now, I think, now we went for our 25th reunion a few years back, and it was all kind of, you don't realize when it comes. But at that time, there was a special bus to go from kind of a off campus office. There was an office kind of in Aliganj, and then there's a bus. So Lucknow on its own was kind of not as big a city as it is now. I mean, though it was still the capital of Uttar Pradesh, nothing compared to like a Mumbai or a Delhi or even Kolkata or a Bangalore. Uh, uh, so I think most of our time was spent on the campus, and because the campus was so far away from the actual city, it was largely weekends uh, in Lucknow city, and most of it in for eating, for watching movies, for general malling and ganjing, we used to call it in Hazrat Ganj. And that was the basically the shopping area and general cool area. So Saturdays, Sundays was there if there were no assignments and things like that. Obviously that IIM is filled with all these things, right, all through your semester. So city itself was nothing great, honestly, if you ask me at that
Okay,
time.
okay. Yeah, no, I think the same experience I had with Bangalore from 1998 to 2000. Like Banagatta Road, the campus was much further away. Like there used to be a
Yeah.
special way to get to downtown MG Road, Bangalore. And but yeah, there was just so much happening on the campus, especially in
Yeah.
terms of money. Before IIM, when I was in Shriram College, I just had to prepare once a year for my final exams. That's it.
Yes.
But
Yeah, this
here,
is all
every three
around the
months,
year.
Yes,
Yeah.
there's a midterm, there's finals, there's midterm, then finals, and then there's quizzes happening during even before the midterms and finals. So
Yes.
I had to apply myself so much more.
Definitely, and that was my experience as well. Because even in engineering, it's what basically every 6 months you have one semester exam,
Yeah,
and that's
yeah,
all it is. And two times a year, that's it.
yes,
And
yes,
there are, for namesake, some lab tests and all, but largely it's the
yes,
every 6 month thing that matters. And
yes,
here you have trimesters every year, and
yes.
then every 3 months there's a test, and then even within those 3 months you have projects and submissions and quizzes and all those things.
And there
So
were even midterms in some of my classes. So I
yeah,
had to apply myself so much more. Yeah.
yes. In fact, in the
Yes,
first year, a lot of people kind of felt that I don't know where we are going to complete this
yeah,
course well,
yeah.
And these were
No,
all fairly bright people. I mean, people
yeah,
who had
yeah,
gone
yeah,
to engineering
yeah.
college or SRCC, as you said, or in
Yes,
IIT,
yes.
things like that.
Yes, no, I remember calling my mother before the first semester's exam and saying, "Mommy, I don't think I'll pass the exam. I think I might have to come back."
Yeah,
And
right.
and I think that's another learning. And then I ended up ranking very high. I think we usually expect much more than what's needed. Like just
Yes.
showing up and doing the work most times is enough in life.
Yeah, and while
Yeah.
when you get into IIM from your college, you are on a high because you feel that
Yes.
okay, very few people get into it, right? So you are among those people who everyone in engineering college is like, okay, great, great, you got into IIM, this and all.
Yeah.
But when you
Yeah.
get into IIM, you get grounded immediately in the first 3 months because everyone around you is bright
Yes.
and you're wondering कि यार ये C मिलेगा इस time या B मिलेगा या whatever, how to avoid that, because that's the real grounding experience you get in the first 3 4 months कि
Yeah.
यहाँ
Yeah.
तो मतलब सभी ज़्यादा उस्ताद है हमसे.
Yeah. Yeah.
हाँ, वही. So that I think is also a big advantage of going there, the
Yes. No,
company and
definitely.
quality
Uh,
of people.
uh,
Yeah.
so definitely. Now let's move on beyond IIM. So did you sit for your placements on campus or no?
Yes, I did. I My first job was with actually an FMCG company,
Okay.
with ICI Paints. That was my first job. I
Okay.
joined them as a management trainee, and
Mm.
uh, it's kind of funny that when I got out of engineering, I wanted to get into management. But when I got into management, I said I don't want to totally leave my technical area. I don't want to sell soap and
Yeah.
stuff like
Thanks.
that,
Yeah.
paint and soap. It is very funny because it
Yeah.
makes you realize what is it. You're confused, right? You're 20 years old,
Sure.
21, 22, and you have to decide. So in the rush of things, everyone says get into FMCG. So yeah, why not? So I appeared for all those interviews and eventually, luckily, I did my yeah, I did my you have these electives, right? It was marketing and IT. Those were the two primary areas that I had focused on. The main majors that they call. So it was a mix of both, but my primary interest was to get into tech in a management role or in a marketing kind of a role. But you know how it happens.
97 में तो Infosys would have been hiring, and all those people
Exactly.
who got in there, and if they've stuck on, वो तो मतलब
Yeah.
मल्टी करोड़पतिज होंगे ना.
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल और but I think what happens is at least you have this weekly placement, right? Placement week in IIMs, at least then. And then most of the funds that come early are the finance and consulting and marketing companies, and the tech companies typically get their slots later. So luckily or unluckily, I got into an FMCG place right early in the first couple of days, I think. And then they had this, I think, rule or something which said that okay, now you need to choose this, or you kind of opt out of placement. So I didn't actually get to the IT part at all, basically. So that's where I decided, okay, let me start here, and then I'll figure out as things come. And pretty soon, actually, in a couple of years, I left that field and got into tech and tech consulting. Yeah.
And then in which company? Which company did you join for?
Yes, I joined ICI Paints. Yeah.
I'm saying how long did you stay in ICI Paint?
I worked with ICI for about less than 2 years. Less than 2 years, and actually, I was with a startup. I actually started my own company after that. That was in 1999. That's when I got into the startup.com bug, and I started my own company, which I ran, which was a tech company, uh, and I ran that for around 4 years, around, yeah, approximately 4 years or so, and I think Wix was asking which company. Then I moved. Then I actually moved to Bangalore, and I joined Oracle here in Bangalore.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you
But
joined
tell us a
Oracle
bit
in
more
which
about
year,
entrepreneurship.
Ranjit?
4 years in your early 20s, you started of
Yes.
making why and what happened?
It was the bug of entrepreneurship in tech at that time. I mean, it was just so contagious, and there was some, obviously the technology was there, the wave was there, the uh, in Silicon Valley, where one of my engineering batchmates had gone for his masters. He was the one who caught that bug first, and he came back to India and said that we should start something together, and that's how we got into it actually. And that's how the bug caught me. And I thought that if I have to start something and if I have to try things out, this is the time. I mean, there's still a lot of time to make improvements in your career later on. Later on, you also have responsibilities and stuff like that, family stuff, and need more financial stability and stuff like that. So if you have to take a chance, now is the time. Thankfully, my family was in favor of that, and they didn't say anything good or bad about it. And I actually jumped in, and we we were basically into web application development at that time, web application development, and then we ended up building up a product over a period of time with the team that I had, and did fairly okay. We were not a product company, and we realized it pretty late that the funding, we were into that VC and funding race for 1 or 2 years, but then that dot-com bust happened, and we realized that it's not going to happen. It's a wave that was there, and so we had to self-sustain. So we did self-sustain for around 2 years after that, and but at some point, basically, we thought that there's always this thing that, okay, do we want to do this all our life, or kind of then move back to our corporate careers? And we took a call that, in fact, one of our clients decided to take over one of our products, and that's when we decided that, okay, now I think it's time to wind up and get back to corporate. Yeah.
So what year was it when you decided to?
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like it. 99, 2000 were really boom years. And then after 9/11, which was in 2001, it was a complete bust year, 2002. So till 2003, I was in this, 2002, 3. And then we, wound this up, and ahead of the times, in the sense that, yes, it was a software company largely. It was a software development company, software services, and sometimes one might say that, okay, if you'd have stuck on, then maybe it might have been a different case. But yeah, I mean, there are various considerations that come into play when you're running your own company,
So you were running a
and
SaaS company as your first entrepreneurial venture 25 years ago before anyone knew what SaaS is.
I wouldn't call it SaaS exactly, but yeah, I mean, it was an application development company, and we used to build web applications. You're right. So to that extent, yeah, I mean, you could call it a SaaS company, but we provided services based on that. We had a team that built those, custom development projects, and then maintained it and all of that. So yeah,
And
I mean,
most of your
we were doing
customers were in the US or in Bangalore?
It was mixed. It was not Bangalore. It was in Mumbai. This At this time I was still in Mumbai. So I we had customers in India and a few outside India as well. Yeah, but most of them were actually in India. Now, when I think about it, our revenue came mostly from Indian customers.
So
And
Ranjit, then if it is Indian customers, then how did 9/11 affect you so badly?
So we were trying to get into the US market. The problem was what I realized is that the reason was that my partner had come back to India. If he was in the US at that time, we might have actually bagged more number of American customers, I think, and then it would have been a more sustainable business. What 9/11 told us was that the chances of getting US customers was going to kind of really shrink over the next couple of years, and then we would have to work in the Indian market to get Indian customers. And as you basically know that the Indian market for services, especially at that time, was not a very easy one. I mean, the margins were not as good as they might be right now. The project sizes were not that big. So we basically decided that if you're not getting American customers over the next 2 3 years, then I think rather than struggling in the Indian market, I think it's best to wind this up.
Ranjit, do you still remember what programming languages your team was using? Because I had done a startup in Bangalore in the year 2000, and I used to use PHP and MySQL. And at that time, PHP and MySQL were startups used to use that,
We
and that
were
was
a Microsoft shop, so it was
okay.
ASP.
ActiveX
The
and
the,
ASP. Yes,
corres- the corresponding of PHP
yes,
was
yes,
basically
ASP. Yes,
ASP and
yes,
Windows,
yes.
SQL Server and
SQL
ASP
Server. Got it.
primarily,
Got it. Got it. Yeah.
and that was our platform that we used to do
Yeah.
most. All of our development,
आजकल
in
भी
fact.
ना मेरे हिसाब से आजकल भी यही लैंग्वेजेस चल रही हैं, उनके थोड़े से नाम और इम्प्रूवमेंट्स हो गई हैं. So it's almost like it's the same. If you
No, no,
know
no,
those
no, no.
languages,
No,
No.
no,
No, now it's
it's a
AI
totally
writing
different
code, and
realm
you're
now.
just telling the AI what code to write. Like literally, now when I write
exactly.
code,
But if you know those
I'm,
languages, I mean, someone like
yeah,
me who has never done coding as a profession. Okay, I did my degree in electronics. I've been an active, or rather, interested coder as a hobby, but I've never done it as a profession. And now with AI, even I can do it. So
yeah.
Yeah, it makes it
because
easy
the
for you to do it.
syntax can change
Yeah.
किसी में यार एक्स्ट्रा सेमीकोलन लगाने होते हैं, किसी में दो ब्रैकेट्स करने होते हैं, किसी में कुछ करना होता है, but broadly it's about the logic. What is the structure of your code
Yeah,
rather
that
than
doesn't change. That doesn't
what the
change. You're
syntax
right.
is.
But some of the recent languages, I spent 10 years in the data and analytics space in corporate before I turned author, and uh, Python was becoming the
Yes.
default language for most coders now.
Yeah,
And
Python is
because
everything
it's so
because
much
Python
easier.
also runs a lot of these AI things.
Yes.
A lot
It
of
has a
AI
lot
code
of,
is based on Python.
that's true. A lot of built-in capabilities and libraries, which
Yeah,
But
it all
which
comes
can
Ranjit,
down
I
to
don't know
those
how
two.
close you
Yeah.
are. Because of my son, who's doing a bit of coding, I was researching these things in the last few years. Do you know C++ and Java are still some of the top top used languages? In fact, if you
yeah.
if you know C++ and Java, it's a very it's a skill set that very few people now have because they
Yes.
are not learning that.
That is true. And what these two languages teach you is how to program, basically.
Yes.
So that is as you said, the tools can change, but that basic skill is very useful. And some of the people, I think the current generation who's using AI for coding may not learn that from upfront because they're asking
Yeah.
the AI to write the code for them. So, yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so that was the entrepreneurial stint, and then I joined RM.
But tell me, how is your family life evolving at this time? Because what I saw with me was that after graduating, entrepreneurial and then a professional job, when at the same time there's a parallel life running, right, with your family life, getting married and all that. How was that evolving?
Oh, I was actually already married when I started my company. So, and in fact, when I closed it down, I had a son. So I mean, it was also one of those triggers where you say that, okay, I think given everything that's happening in my life right now, I think so. As you said, there's a parallel life, and obviously they were very supportive. My wife is also a professional; she's a doctor. So yeah, so that way it's always a help. but parallelly, yes, you are right. I mean, it's both a support while you're running your company because you're not alone, and then the stresses of running your own company are much different than the regular stresses of a corporate job. So that extent, it's always. I mean, now when I look at it in hindsight, it's a good thing that I got married relatively early. That support was available, and at the same time, it's also a responsibility, especially when a kid comes into the picture. So towards the end of my entrepreneurial venture closure, basically before that, I had my son was born, and that was one of the triggers for me to take that decision. That okay, I wouldn't say the only trigger. It's not as if my son said it. Okay, come on, nothing like that. But it's just the additional thing that. I decided at that point that I think I would, given the options in front of me, I would take up this Oracle job and move to Bangalore for it.
Very nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the
So how many
that's how
children?
I get
So
to.
how many children did you end up having, Ranjit?
I have only one son.
You only have one son, and you've been
Yeah,
with
yeah.
your wife throughout all these years. You got married in
Yes.
like 1997, right after graduating, or
Yeah, on the last day of 1997, so
okay,
31st December. So,
okay,
so yeah, when I was 24,
okay,
and that's when I got married. I mean, when I was a management trainee, basically at
very
ICI,
nice.
and she was actually studying. She was doing a master's at that time,
Okay, and it
and
was arranged marriage, or did you know her?
no, no, I knew her. It's a love
Okay,
marriage. Yeah,
okay, very good,
yeah,
very
I
good.
knew her since my plus two.
Okay, 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 okay. And how old is your
So
son now?
he is now 24.
Okay, very
Yeah.
nice. And
Yeah.
what is he doing?
So he's working at Deloitte Consulting here
Okay,
in Bangalore. Yeah.
okay.
He's finished
And
his
did he?
studies. He actually went to SRCC. When you said SRCC,
Oh,
I
wow, he must be very brilliant
yeah.
because SRCC in
Yeah.
1995 it was much easier to get into than I hear now,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
now
It
it
is a
has become
tough
much harder.
place to get in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
He
he
went to
finished his.
SRCC, and what did he do after that?
He went to London School of Economics for his masters.
Oh, very
Yeah.
brilliant kid, huh?
Yeah.
Oh,
After SRCC,
oh,
and then he returned to India and joined Deloitte.
okay, okay. And in London School of Economics, did he do a master's there?
Yeah, he did a master's in accounting and finance, not economics,
Got it.
in accounting and
Accounting and
finance. Yeah,
finance. 2 years
yeah.
master's.
No, it's a 1 year master's now.
1 year master's. Okay,
I think in the UK it's all 1 year.
okay,
Uh,
okay.
yeah,
Very nice,
so
very
he
nice.
did that, and then last year onwards he has been working in Bangalore now.
Okay, okay. Stays with parents or no?
Uh, yeah, I mean, technically, yes, he does.
Yeah.
Uh, but I think on weekends he's off somewhere.
Okay,
So,
okay, okay.
yeah, but yeah, for on paper, he stays with us.
Yes. So,
Yeah,
so in 2003, after the 9/11 happens and somebody else takes over your product to wind down the company, and then from 2003 till around 2020, you work with Oracle?
20. No, I didn't work only with Oracle. I
Okay,
worked with Oracle for a few years, and then I moved a few employers. I worked with HP for a few years,
okay,
uh, and then I worked with Lenovo for a few years,
okay,
and then I joined IBM. And with IBM, I was for the longest period. I think I was with IBM for around 9 years plus,
okay.
nine
And this was mostly consulting to like,
consulting. Yeah,
so it's mainly consulting to companies outside India to help them
outside India. Yes.
improve, reduce their cost maybe by getting work done in
Yes,
India.
I
Is that
started with consulting in the area of CRM. That was my initial area because actually what happened is my company had a product which later on they started calling CRM. It was more like a customer contact center kind of a product, IT help desk, come everything. And apparently Oracle found that interesting, that experience, primarily because they were into CRM at that time. So that's how I started my career, largely the corporate piece. So CRM consulting is what I started, but ended up landing myself in marketing analytics. So data analytics was largely my area since after Oracle at HP, at Lenovo, and even at IBM. I spent almost 15 years altogether, primarily in data analytics. Yeah.
When you say data analytics, can you describe a typical project? Like, what are you doing exactly? Like, so you going into a company and can you describe a project? Like, yeah,
So I was part of this team, which whose primary responsibility was to get into client accounts, either existing or new, along with the sales teams, and pitch analytics, which meant number of things. It could mean doing some basic pilot projects, or it could mean responding to RFPs and giving them specific analytics solutions, or it could also mean doing some business cases, saying that how is it that analytics is going to help you. The goal was to basically pitch an analytics solution, uh, and then implement it using the delivery teams that we had in India. uh, but most of my role ended once it came to delivery. uh, Later on, they started adding things like practice handling and all of those things. But eventually, essentially, it was a consulting role where you get into clients and make a case for business analytics there.
so give me an example. Say, okay, maybe you worked with a grocery chain in America and you said, like, look, you implement our solution and I'll be able to tell you which products are selling better, which products are, what price points
Yeah,
are
so
selling
my
better.
sector was largely high tech, because I had worked at HP and Lenovo earlier. So it was largely a high tech and electronics, consumer electronics, high tech retail. So examples could be, if you are an e-commerce shop, let's say a Circuit City or some such large chain, and you want to know which are your products that customers buy together, for example.
Okay,
With a particular laptop series, is there something else that customers buy?
okay,
Uh, so then we could pitch that as a project that will do a data analytics project around that, which will help you, let's say, increase your average sale per customer,
okay.
because of which you will gain so and so, and then make a business case around uh, why you should invest in an analytics project of this kind. The implementation could be using an IBM products at that time, like SPSS or Cognos and things like that, or it
Mm,
could be third party products also,
okay.
uh, open source and things
Hmm.
like that. Later on, it started becoming more and more open source,
Hmm.
as clients wanted to reduce costs and things like that.
Hmm.
But that was primarily my. So an example was that Circuit City. It could also be another, or it could be things like people want to understand how their marketing campaigns are working.
Hmm.
Let's say they're spending certain amount of money on campaigns of a particular kind.
Hmm.
So then you do campaign analytics and figure out, okay, what are your conversion rates, uh, which kind of customers are responding better. Can
Hmm.
we do some modeling around that and try and predict which will be better customers for you in the future? Segmentation of customers, all that kind of stuff. There's a large plethora of projects around that area that one can implement. Basically, yeah, that was the primary goal.
And Ranjit, what's the era? What are the years you were doing this? Just to complete the
This
circle.
was from so at HP and Lenovo. I was more internal analytics head. Basically, I ran analytics projects for the company, basically for HP and Lenovo themselves. That was from 2007, 8 till around 11, and then I joined IBM, where IBM was largely a vendor. So where we supplied I was on the client side initially, and then eventually on the vendor side. So that was from 2011 till around 20.
I was kind of putting in. So back then, when I say back then, so 2007, 2008, I was still at Accenture. So that was the last proper, like, big brand consulting job I ever did before moving into investments. And one of the last things I did at Accenture was for Accenture India to help launch. There were two of us. uh, to help launch CRM practice for Accenture India because CRM was growing, and this was 2007 and 8. And so I was just putting it in perspective because that is when CRM analytics and everything, marketing MROI kind of practices were growing in India, or rather, there was a potential. It was non-existent at that time. So Accenture was, I remember, it was one of the first few 2007 to start thinking of this on scale.
Yeah, in fact, my job before HP was, that's what I was telling Vix also, that was Oracle, and that was largely in CRM consulting. So from CRM, I moved to analytics primarily.
And it's the same thing. And analytics, CRM moved to analytics, and analytics has became machine learning, and machine learning has become AI. So Ranjit, you've taken us through your journey for the first 10 or 15 years. Tell us the last 10 years. I'm most interested कि analytics से AI की journey आपने करी.
हाँ करी है, not as much because in the last 4 or 5 years I have been, though I have done some freelance consulting even when I was an author, but largely on the cutting edge or the real thing was in data analytics when I was in those 10, 15 years before the AI wave the way it is today has happened. So data analytics was also something which was pretty elementary even in 2010, 2009, 10, 11. You know, the entire concept of using data for decisions, not just for your basic things like dashboards and ROI, as you said, but even for using it for modeling and predicting things had just begun. So I was, in fact, IBM had acquired a product called SPSS at that time, and SPSS used to be the default market research tool when we used to study, if you remember. So it was a very powerful and good product which IBM had acquired, and we used that for most of our consulting primarily because, especially the predictive analytics part of it, where you use data to then determine things like will this customer buy, those kind of things. So quite a lot of good work till, as you said, machine learning happened, and then I think somewhere around 2015 or 16, a lot of it didn't require consulting. A lot of software products started doing it themselves. I mean, it was built in, right? It was built in into CRM products, for example, or it was built into a lot of operational products. So yeah, I mean that's how machine learning happened, and I think the AI thing happened a bit later. 2018, 19 onwards is when the AI boom happened, and
I think
that
what
was
you're talking
largely the,
about is the generative AI because the generative AI
yeah,
happened, but otherwise, apart from generative AI and
yeah, the
machine learning are
image
kind of
processing, yeah,
synonymous in a way. What's called. It's
yes,
only the generative part that happened after the Transformers paper and in the last 5 years.
yeah, after 2020 approximately,
Yes.
yes. So prior to that, the way they used to differentiate data analytics and AI was, data analytics was to do with structured data, and AI was largely, the text and images and all the unstructured data.
Yeah.
So that's how they used to differentiate between.
And I
And
think
what you're right in the
I
sense,
think now
generative
everything has
AI happened
converged.
later.
Now everything is called
Yes,
AI. Even I'll be honest, even when things are not AI, it's called AI.
they are being called AI. Yes,
लोग
yes.
एक्सेल में एक थोड़ा सा फॉर्मूला डाल देते हैं वो भी एआई बन गया आज की डेट में मतलब इट हैज गॉन टू
It's
दोज
at that
एक्सट्रीम्स.
classic. It's at that classic technology curve where it is at the height of hype, or maybe it was. I'm told some of my colleagues, former colleagues, say that it's actually gone down the hype scale. This year is expected to be the year when it might go down the hype scale. Last year was a real
No,
height of
I
AI hype.
personally,
Yeah.
and maybe I don't know if
Mm.
you've seen any of our. So every Wednesday we do an AI 30-minute discussion between Vix and me. कि हमने
Okay.
इस हफ्ते क्या सीखा क्या नया है सो वी आर नॉट टेलिंग पीपल दैट ओके दिस इज द मस्ट वॉच और इसके बाद आपको सब कुछ पता चल जाएगा इट्स बेसिकली आर
Uh,
इंटरेस्ट बिकॉज बोथ ऑफ अस आर in or around the AI circles is this is what
right.
we get and maybe it'll some people will find it useful but my biggest thing that I've seen is that AI the word AI is being misused so badly that overall people have a hype एंड देन उसके बाद आप किसी भी चीज को एआई बोल दो। कल को मैं छोले भटूरे की प्लेट पे भी एआई अगर लिख दूंगा और उसके बाद मेरे छोले भटूरे नहीं बिके, डजंट मीन कि
हाँ,
एआई डाउन हो गया है। इट जस्ट मीन्स कि
राइट।
मैंने तो कुछ, you know what I mean.
गलत
Obviously,
यूज
I'm
कर दिया
taking an
उसका।
extreme example, but that is, I have
नहीं
seen
नहीं,
people use
इट्स
AI for
इट्स नॉट,
anything. जो मतलब 25 साल पहले भी
इट्स
कोडिंग कर लेता था ना, फोर्ट्रैन, फॉरगेट योर जावा, फॉरगेट योर पैस्कल, फोर्ट्रैन में भी हम कोड लिखते थे, उसको भी लोग आज की डेट में एआई बोल रहे हैं।
Yeah, I बोल रहे हैं, yes.
हम्म,
This is the classic. I mean, we have seen this in the dot com period where everything had a dot com with it, right? There
yes.
was pets.com, there was falana.com, anything dot com started. Uh, it changed the world eventually, no doubt about it. Eventually, the entire thing went online, and dot com was the starting point of that. But at that time, that hype cycle had reached that point of no return almost. A similar thing I think will happen with AI. It's a technology that's definitely going to change
Hmm.
a lot of things in the future, but it's not all going to happen in 1 year.
Yes, yes. So I'm really waiting to jump into your last 4 or 5 years of authoring, but I do want to cover this one last point. Your last few years before jumping into becoming a full-time author and then a publisher, वो कैसे हुआ? What was your personal story behind it? What was happening in the world? Because you were in my opinion, and again, hindsight is 2020. You were in the hub of it. You were in machine learning, analytics, and so on. And then you decided to give it up and say कि मैं तो अब लिखूंगा.
Yeah. So so there is obviously a personal side to it in the sense that there are some drivers within, right, which take over beyond the what you're otherwise doing. So I think one of the and I think this was something which I learned even in my first entrepreneurial venture. Uh, one of the reasons why, one of the things that I learned was that in any business, I think the more than the value proposition of what you're trying to build, once it is established, longevity of your business was what kind of uh, is the most important thing. How long can you sustain the business through ups and downs of the inevitable ups and downs of economy. And I realized that for that longevity, whether it's at an individual level or at a company level, some degree of independence from the market is required. So I learned, I took that lesson as an individual lesson, and even from that time, I realized that. And as corporate jobs changed in India, when we started, it was a much more stable career, and now obviously the current generation faces the thick of things. I realized that one needs to build some financial independence for oneself as part of eventually if you want to do something on your own. And see, once a person has become an entrepreneur, the urge to do something of your own, it may be a business, it may be a creative pursuit, or it may be just anything else, it doesn't go away that easily. So that remained with me even through my 18 years of corporate experience that eventually I ended up having.
So
uh,
quick question. When you say creative pursuits, what was your creative pursuits? Because you were telling us that you didn't want to get into tech when you were in engineering. Like
yeah.
creatively, what kind of things were you doing
So
then?
I was always a writer. I
Right.
used to write on even when I was working. I actually had a blog since almost 2010. Um since I think around 10 years before I turned full time writer.
So you have
I was a regular
do you still
blogger.
have that blog?
Yes, I haven't kept most of the writing there alive because some of it has now been published as books. Uh, so my publisher basically said that don't keep it on the blog because it's in your book.
Yes.
But the blog is still there. The content, I used to have close to 400, 500 posts that I have should have been by now. But then I think some of it has got converted into a book. That was actually my first book. It was a non-fiction book, which I got published even when I was working at my corporate job. So I used to be a writer since then, and then I had created a few characters. And that's when my first book got published is when I basically started thinking about kind of doing this for a large part of the last few years of my career at least. So my plan was to do this after 50 or 55 or something like that. But I had started building a certain amount of financial independence for myself even while I was corporate working. So I waited for the right time, and the thought had started in 2015, but eventually I took the jump in 2020 and decided that okay, enough of this corporate thing, and now I want to spend the next 10 years of active working life, assuming that one will at least do something of my own. I didn't start saying that I want to be a writer. I actually thought that maybe I will do some consulting freelance as well, and I still do it sometimes.
बट 9 to 5
But
ऑफिस जॉब नहीं
majority of the
करनी है, 9 to 5 ऑफिस जॉब
नहीं, corporate
नहीं
job
करनी,
नहीं
30 साल 25 साल कर लिया. एंड व्हेन यू से
कर लिया, हाँ.
फाइनेंशियल इंडिपेंडेंस, रंजीत, I want to put that in perspective because some of our viewers probably might be now or in a few years in the same position, and I think it's a very
Yes,
motivational story. What does financial independence mean? For me, it means कि मैं सड़क पे नहीं आ जाऊंगा. बट सबसे बड़ी चीज है
right,
कि उसके बाद आई हैव पीपल डिपेंडिंग ऑन मी. नाउ आई नो यू सेड दैट
right.
योर वाइफ्स अ डॉक्टर, शी इज प्रॉब्ली आल्सो अर्निंग, बट
Yes,
यू हैव किड्स, उनकी
yes.
एजुकेशन वो सब. सो हाउ डिड यू टेल अस अ बिट मोर अबाउट दैट पार्ट ऑफ कि व्हाट डज फाइनेंशियल
So,
इंडिपेंडेंस मीन?
financial independence ke I realized through that journey that there are three levels. One is the basic financial security, as you said, कि मैं सड़क पे नहीं आऊँगा. मतलब जॉब गई तो ठीक है, एटलीस्ट अपना खाना पीना तो चलते रहेगा. That a lot of people in our vicinity would reach in 15 years of work experience or whatever. I mean, typically. But then, as you said, they have other responsibilities in their life at that time. So that's the second level where you say that okay, it's not just financial security, but real financial freedom. Saying that okay, I know that this is what I'm going to need, and I have arrangements made for that. And then the third level is probably financial luxury, where you say that okay, all of it is done. Now I have no more responsibilities, and whatever I have done, my investments will take care of my retirement in the future as well. So, financial security is something that I think a lot of people can reach fairly easily. In my particular case, and on the personal side, is that there's always life going on. One of the advantages of getting married early and having a child early is that by 2020 my son had almost got into his education completeness phase. So I knew my visibility on what I am going to face, and a certain degree of financial freedom was available, due to which even after that most people find it difficult to take a jump, because a lot of people are cocooned in the comfort of a job, right? A salary at the end of every month and things like that. And it did affect me also initially. I said okay, this is going to be, but then I did some experiments in the last year of my working, that I'm not going to touch this and let's see what happens. So it was a matter of a certain degree of courage needed, and I just took the jump after that, and uh, things so far have worked out well.
I
Yeah.
think, Ranjit, you have put it so beautifully in a 3 point framework. Uh, and it's very useful for me also. And usually in like you said, in the first 5 years, 10 years, and especially for MBAs, it's usually earlier. If you're But in any other profession, 10 15 years, you in a profession, in a proper white collar job, people go from level 1 to level 2. And I think what the last point you said is, when people don't take this leap, it's because they, in their minds, they are still in level 2, they are not in level 3. And it's that distinction. How do you define where does 2 end and where does level 3 start? It's that little distinction that it's like, okay, where do you draw the line, and how much more do you want?
Yeah. So that is a very personal decision, and there has to be a certain enough that if you have. For me, it was the drive to just do things on my own, and I didn't want to really work in the corporate environment anymore. So that's the reason I kind of, and it was something which was underlying my personality for a very long period of time. So, but you're right, it does take that jump. You are at the cliff, but then you jump
You
with the
have to
parachute.
jump. You have to jump. Now, I'm going to ask one last question, but I'm after this we will dive into or jump into your authoring and all that. Is one last question about taking the jump. Is ठीक है फैमिली हो गई मनी हो गया एंड ऑल दैट हो गया बट यू जस्ट सेड आई डिडंट वांट टू बी पार्ट ऑफ अ कॉर्पोरेट लाइफ but 20 plus years you've been doing something. Why? What's the one or two top reasons why didn't you want to be part of it apart from I know you said creativity. ठीक है corporate life में नहीं था but why not a corporate life?
Yeah, creativity is what fills it after you take the jump. But I think it was largely to uh, release time for myself. So time is critical, honestly, and I think as you grow a bit older, it becomes even more critical, I think. So once you hit 50 and things like that, you feel that time is very important. And I kind of made this calculated inner calculation that, okay, when I left, I had around, let's say, 58 or 59 is the retirement age in India. Then I have about 10 years of work life left at that time.
Yeah,
And I
that's
said,
what you're
okay,
giving up
that's
technically.
what I'm giving
उसके
up.
बाद तो वैसे भी
Right.
जबरदस्ती करना पड़ेगा राइट.
वैसे भी जबरदस्ती मतलब I don't even know whether you will end up working till 58, but let's say if you give that benefit of doubt, I basically said that okay, 10 more years, I'll spend 1 or 2 years figuring out what I want to do, and then actually 8 or 9 years doing it is what wanted to. And then in those first 1 or 2 years, I experimented with a few things like starting my own company again. But then again, what's the end game there? You know, I asked those kind of questions to myself, and I came to the conclusion that I want to be an author after that. And
Right.
hopefully, there's no retirement age for being an author.
Yeah, so that took you 1 or 2 years. Your first decision
Yeah, for
step
taking up.
was I'm getting out of corporate
Yes,
and doing something on my own. And then only after
yes,
that, एक दो साल करा, and then you said, अच्छा ठीक है, I found my way. I've tried this one,
yes,
two, three, and then this is what is working for me.
that's correct.
Okay, okay.
Yes,
And and
yes.
and and then author creativity की तो बहुत सारी चीजें भी हैं. You could have started a YouTube channel like us.
Yeah, could have. Yeah, but I just asked myself what is it that I liked, and the natural answer for that was to write. And if if you have something like that, you should capitalize on it. I was not going and looking around for ये option है ये B है ये C है ऐसा कुछ था ही नहीं because it basically this was a natural thing that came that I just like writing, that's it. So then, even within that, I spent some time on figuring out whether I should write fiction or non-fiction. And I realized that if I want to do things over a long period of time, let's say 10 years, then fiction was the most satisfying part of it. And let's say you want to create a body of work over 10, 15 years, then fiction is what appealed the most to me. And that's where I decided to write fiction. And it was natural in the sense that I didn't have any doubts about whether I enjoy it or not. If the issue is only what is it that you love to do, then the answer was very clear in my head that it's writing. Yeah,
So Ranjit, if I understand the as the definitions go, fiction is when you make up a story, and non-fiction is
that's right.
when you make up facts.
Yeah, you basically write based on certain messages that you want to convey, or there are many shades of non-fiction also. But yeah, basically it is not a made-up story; it's a real story.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And in fiction, do you have like did you take time to decide what kind of fiction? Because fiction तो कुछ भी हो सकता है. It could be a murder mystery, it could be a science fiction, it could be whatever.
Yeah. So as I said, I started with I had a blog, right? So I had a couple of characters that I had that used to appear on that blog. So they were called Jigneshbhai Patel and Swaminathan. So these were the two characters that I had. So these were two friends who used to talk over coffee, and they used to talk about multiple things. It was like a column that I had written for almost 10 years. So my first decision was to get them out of that column and get them into a humorous setting. It had a bit of humor, wisdom, all that kind of stuff. So my first attempt was, actually, I wrote a novel first with Jigneshbhai and Swami as the primary characters. Uh, so I wrote that. That was in the first year. But later on, I actually realized that I'm better off writing shorter fiction. So I started writing short stories in around 2021 or so, and I wrote a bunch of short stories since then. Since then, actually, I got into primarily writing shorter fiction. So I do both these things. I write these Jigneshbhai and Swami coffee conversations, as I call them, from time to time. I don't write Jigneshbhai and Swami novels anymore. Uh, but and then I also write short stories which don't have these characters. These are just random short stories based on various themes. So, like for example, I have written a set of short stories on travel. There's a set of short stories on apartment living. Some kind of theme. So I primarily write short fiction now.
अच्छा, गिव अस योर इनसाइट ऑन अपार्टमेंट लिविंग। आपने क्या वो जो इंडिया का कि चीनी खत्म हो गई है, दूध खत्म हो गया, बगल से ले आते थे, और बगल के घर के बच्चे दूसरे घर में
So I this was inspired by some ideas during COVID, where all of us were stuck at home for a year or so, and a lot of people ended up being stuck at home even after that year, whether they were working or non-working. And obviously, all of us live in apartments, and we meet a lot of characters. So I had a bunch of stories. In fact, that title is called "2 BHK for Rent." That's the name of that book, and it basically consists of a bunch of around, I think, 20 odd stories around apartment living. So there is, stories around, uh, a person who's doing the laundry for us in the apartment. Then there are some stories around our cooks. Then there are stories around, society committee meetings, stray dogs in apartments, all kinds of stories. So anything that, I mean, a lot of friends who've read that say that, okay, this happens in my apartment as well, and things like that. So that was one collection that I wrote. In fact, it got published around, I think, around a year or year and a half back, years back.
Ranjit, what is the economics of writing fiction in India?
So the economics is not as, I would say, if one were to compare it with an MBA career, then it's not as lucrative as an MBA career. Definitely not.
क्या बात कर रहे हो?
Uh,
स्टीफन किंग, इफ यू बिकम स्टीफन किंग, उसका कितनी रॉयल्टी आती है?
so the way it works is that in in an MBA career, your upside is limited, but your downside is also limited, right? In a creative career like writing, your downside could be potentially unlimited, but your upside could also be potentially unlimited.
डाउनसाइड
So
भी
Stephen
लिमिटेड है,
King,
जीरो से ज्यादा, जीरो से कम तो नहीं हो सकता ना? दे कैन टेक
जीरो से
मनी
कम
फ्रॉम
क्या
यू।
हाँ,
डाउनसाइड
वो
है?
बराबर है.
नहीं,
Downside
downside
is not
unlimited means you
unlimited
can,
in the
like,
sense.
you can go into debt, right?
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
it's not, downside is not unlimited in the sense that you're not producing a movie by taking a loan or something
Hmm.
that you're going to totally. So yeah, to that extent, it's not unlimited. I mean,
But
if you
you're
are if you
talking as
are
an author,
financially free
right? You're talking
as an
as an
author,
author,
yes,
not as a publisher.
not as a publisher. So as a publisher, it's a different game.
But
As
as
an
an author
author,
की किताब लिखी तो क्या मिलेगा? Like Vix is asking कि what is the economics, कि अगर अच्छी चले, how does it how does it work? How does the royalty work?
so I have a combination of books that are published by other publishers and books that are published by myself, like self-published, right?
So other
So
publishers में कैसे
self-published.
चलता है? That you've written a
So
book
other publishers, the royalties are typically around anywhere between 7.5 to 12% per sale
of
of the
what?
book, of the selling price
Like
of the book,
MRP या of the
MRP.
MRP. तो
Yeah,
अगर आपने 100
whatever
रुपए
is the
की बुक
selling
है,
price.
लेकिन वो एक्चुअली बुक स्टोर पे 25 रुपए में बिक रही है, तो आपको 25 का
वो
दस
कितने भी
परसेंट
हो वो कितने भी हो, वो डिस्काउंटिंग इज अ डिफरेंट फैक्टर.
हाँ,
But basically, the way the agreements with publishers go, that they will provide a certain percentage of the selling price of the book, published selling price of the book, to the author.
And what is that percentage? Is it like 10% or 50%?
So for most first-time authors, it's somewhere between 8 to 12%, as I said. So it won't be. It's definitely not 50%. It's if you are a very accomplished author, then it can go up to 15
जेके
or.
रावलिंग को मिलता होगा 50%।
I don't think so. It's never that much.
अच्छा तो
No,
एक बात
I don't
बताओ
think so.
कि
Yeah.
you're getting paid say 10% of the published book price, and
Yes.
आपकी बुक की क्या प्राइस है, 100 रुपीज और मोर?
It can be anywhere from 200 to 300 rupees. Typically,
अच्छा,
that's where most of my books sell in that range.
okay,
So
so you're
basically, you get 20 or 30 rupees, yeah,
20, okay.
per
And
book.
how many
If
books
you
have you
are
sold?
not publishing on your own, if you're publishing on your own, then the royalties increase because then you can determine.
तो आप अपनी लेफ्ट पॉकेट से राइट पॉकेट में डाल रहे हो ना।
Basically, then Amazon or the distributor basically gives you the royalty, not the publisher.
अच्छा तो एक बात बताओ, what is the publisher doing for the 90%? Is he marketing you? Is he promoting you?
It's a question that I have not been able to answer. So I don't want to say anything that.
दिस इज व्हाट आई अंडरस्टैंड कि एक बुक है वो मार्केट में, दैट्स द एंड प्रोडक्ट, एंड वो बुक को छापने में कुछ तो लगा है, उसका पूरा सप्लाई चेन में कुछ तो लगा है। दैट इज नन
Right.
ऑफ योर कंसर्न रंजीत, राइट?
That is none
और
of my
आप वो बुक
concern.
शेल्फ
If
पे भी
I.
पहुंच गई है, वो पब्लिशर के रिलेशन से पहुंची है या नहीं पहुंची है, कितना बड़ा
Right.
पब्लिशर है और कितना छोटा है, उस पर डिपेंड करता है। तो वहां पे
Right.
पहुंच गई है राइट टाइप ऑफ प्लेस पे,
Right.
एंड यू हैव डन नथिंग apart from writing the book, which is obviously the biggest thing, but you know what I mean,
Yes.
कि उसके बाद
Yes. Yes.
आपने उसको दे
Absolutely.
दिया,
That's
उसने
how the
उसने
business is.
आपका
Yeah.
पूरा काम कर दिया। सो विक्स, कि पब्लिशर ने तो ये किया ना, अब उसके लिए कितना पैसा होना चाहिए, कितना नहीं होना चाहिए, आई एम जस्ट ट्राइंग टू गेट कि यार 8-10% में इज दैट इनफ, और शुड इट बी 50, डिपेंडिंग
So
ऑन
that
कि
doesn't
आपकी बुक
matter,
कितनी
Vignani.
आसानी से
नहीं,
बिक जाती है। देखो
that
पब्लिशर
doesn't matter. What
इकोनॉमिक्स
matters
क्या
is
होंगे।
कि अगर if that book is available at each airport bookshop in India, and if I only get paid 10%, I'm happy with it. But if अगर हर train station पे available है, हर airport bookshop पे available है, तो he's making money for his distribution muscle. तो
या
बट अगर कहीं पे अवेलेबल नहीं है तो फिर मुझे 90% भी दे दोगे तो मैं क्या करूंगा, कोई खरीदेगा ही नहीं फिर।
एग्जैक्टली तो वो आपको फर्स्ट, लाइक ही सेइंग कि फर्स्ट टाइम ऑथर को कम क्यों मिल रहा है, क्योंकि उसको बहुत मेहनत करनी पड़ रही है। अब अगर आप स्टीफन किंग हो, जेके रावलिंग हो, या और नेम योर ओन फेवरेट ऑथर, अमिताभ घोष हो या कुछ भी है, उसको तो सिर्फ ना वो दुकान को बताना है, रेलवे स्टेशन में भी नॉट, बट एयरपोर्ट स्टोर को बताना है कि यार ये वाली बुक है, इसको रख लेना, वो अपने आप ही सबसे आगे रखेंगे। तो आपका नाम बिक रहा है। अगर आपका नाम ही बिक रहा है और पब्लिशर को मेहनत ही कम करनी पड़ रही है, तो वो उसके कॉस्ट कम है। अगर उसके कॉस्ट कम है, वो आपको ज्यादा रेवेन्यू का परसेंटेज देंगे। इट्स आई थिंक ये वो डिमांड सप्लाई इकोनॉमिक्स है एट द एंड ऑफ द डे।
अच्छा ठीक है रंजीत, एक
That
एक
is
बात बताओ, हाउ मेनी बुक्स हैव यू सोल्ड टिल नाउ?
sold as in or written.
नो
रिटेन
सोल्ड,
एंड पब्लिश्ड।
नहीं अरे सोल्ड, हाउ मेनी
Written,
कॉपीज हैव बीन सोल्ड? आई एम ट्राइंग टू मल्टीप्लाई दैट बाय 20 एंड ट्राइंग टू फिगर आउट हाउ मच मनी कैन आई आस्क रंजीत आफ्टर द इंटरव्यू।
you will realize that I am a fairly poor author.
रंजीत, कैन योर बुक्स स्पॉन्सर आवर चैनल?
एग्जैक्टली, सो
I don't know that.
वी विल शो
नहीं
योर
नहीं, मैं
बुक्स राइट
सीधा
एट द।
पॉइंट पे आता हूँ यार, मैं पंजाबी हूँ, मैं सीधा पॉइंट पे आ रहा हूँ, तू घुमा फिरा के पूछ रहा
नहीं
है।
नहीं, अच्छा रंजीत, बट हाउ
I
मेनी
don't know
बुक्स
what
हैव
are
यू?
the expenses for your channel, so
जोक्स
we'll have
अपार्ट,
to talk that.
नहीं,
रंजीत
have you
जोक्स
sold
But
अपार्ट।
yeah,
10,000 copies or more than 10,000 copies?
all my books combined, somewhere maybe, yeah, I have. So there are, see what happens is typically if you are a writer of only one book, na, see it's not a very sustainable business for an author, right? I mean, you need to have financial freedom to even continue doing that. Most authors. what they do is they typically keep writing over a long period of time. And in my case, for example, there's one book, The Bend in the Road, which is a travel based book, a collection of stories around a road trip that sells more than 50% of all my books basically. So that is my best seller, kind of, one can say, even within my.
There are a lot of viewers in our channel who would like to become authors. What I'm trying to understand is ki you were earning 2 lakhs every 2 weeks probably when you were working for your consulting career. And now you're saying, ki, boss, I've sold 10,000 books.
So if it is money that you are going to write for, then it's not a good value proposition to become an author.
Forget about good
Money
value
only.
proposition. घर चलाने जितने भी तो पैसे नहीं होंगे अगर आपने 10,000 कॉपी बेची है लास्ट 5 साल में 20 रुपए पर कॉपी मिलता है. So that is what 2 lakh रुपए. And you were earning that every 2 weeks.
Correct. So you don't really make a lot of money as an author from just the book sales. That is
Okay.
absolutely the truth of the economics of
No, see, there's a difference between
writing.
not earning enough money and not earning any money. This is not about earning enough money. This is like कि घर का पैसा भी मतलब खर्च भी नहीं चलेगा. This is like you're earning that less.
Correct. नहीं चलेगा.
Already said that Vex कि मत बनो author मतलब only after you cross level 2 बनो.
Absolutely. That is the key advice that I would give to anyone who's 30 years old or 35 years old. And if you need the money from writing, there are two reasons. One is the money will not come that easily, correct? Secondly, the money not coming will affect your writing. Okay, if you're in it for money, if writing is not like a factory, right? Or it's not like a consulting project कि client आ गया तो चलो अभी PPT बनाना है और चलो भागते हैं उसके पीछे. Okay, writing needs some inner, if you have turmoil within your head because you are not making money out of that writing, it will affect your writing. So don't write only for money. Definitely not for money. If your primary objective is to do a bestseller and replace your MBA salary with writing, you are going down a hole that will not get filled that easily. Let me warn you that. Having been there, done that, I'm 52 years old now. So please take that advice.
Yeah, yeah. Whenever somebody says going down a hole, whenever somebody says going down a hole, it reminds me of Saddam Hussein going down the hole and hiding from Americans and then getting killed. When going down the hole is like a very, very bad situation to be in.
So if you have liabilities, if you have responsibilities, and if you don't have the freedom to write in the way that you want, so there are multiple reasons. One is publishers will squeeze you. You know, I, I don't need to go to any publisher as of now. If you really ask me, I mean, I can publish my own books all my life. So it's a privilege. The privilege of messing up is something that I want for myself, right? So if you don't have that privilege, then don't go down this path unless you are willing to live that life
So
of a.
Ranjit, I'm very interested कि publisher के पास पहली book as an author जाके मतलब what is that situation? 2 मिनट में वो समझाओ. And I'm asking for myself and maybe for some of our viewers, but definitely for myself क्योंकि मैं भी बहुत सालों से सोच रहा हूँ कि यार book लिखो.
So if you are. So typically, if you look at it from an MBA perspective, the publishing industry is ruled by around top 5 or 6 big name publishers,
Okay. इंडिया
right?
में कौन है?
Whether it's in
Penguin.
so whether it is Harper Collins, Penguin, Random House, Simon Schuster, ये सब बड़े वाले हो गए. इंडिया में रूपा है. इंडिया में there are a few more. Aleph करके एक है, Penguin है. These are all big names. But basically, you can 80% of the books sold, not published, are these 5 people, right? Or 5 or 6 people.
And have you published with any of these big 5, 6 people or no?
No, I haven't. I haven't. So it is more or less impossible for a first-time author to get a publishing deal with any of these
तो ये
five.
किसी को लेते ही नहीं है, फर्स्ट टाइम ऑथर्स को लेते ही नहीं है.
Most likely, very unlikely, very unlikely. I mean, unless you come from some, MFA recommendation, or you have some big.
हाँ, या फिर इतने बड़े इंसानों की अपनी बायोग्राफी लिख रहे हो एंड देन इट्स अ डिफरेंट थिंग.
Huh, so they have, so typically if you, in fact I can tell you, there's a, when the Simon Schuster and Random House, Penguin Random House का जब merger हो रहा था, there was a they had to disclose all the publishing data, right? Because there was a court case around them, and that's when it was realized that even among these big five publishers or big six publishers, 60 to 70% of their revenue is back titles. So back titles is basically sales of books that have already been published from, like Stephen King ka Shining, okay, or even like for example, Bible that has been published, for example, it sells every year, right? Stephen King ka Shining, there are people. J.K. Rowling ka Harry Potter series hai. The five books have been published more than 20 years back,
सो
but they
बेसिकली
still
किसी
sell.
टाइटल उन्होंने कभी ओन किया था, कभी पब्लिश किया था, और उसी का खा रहे हैं.
And the new titles,
Hmm.
when new titles come, half of those new titles are from past authors.
Right.
So out of the remaining 20%. So you have basically a pie of 5 to 10% for new authors, for these new big publishers. So for any new first time author, it is a pipe dream to even expect that one of these will take your book, and unless it has received some literary acclaim somewhere, some background has been built around it, or you're a celebrity already, or things like that.
Yes.
So most of the first time authors typically get published through small publishing houses which want to experiment on new
So
names,
what was
basically.
your first book, first time publisher experience? Any interesting
So
stories?
my first book got published through a Delhi-based author, a Delhi-based publication called Wisdom Publications. They were they were following my blog for some reason, and I actually did not want to even publish it in a book, but they were following my blog, and then the chief editor, actually mailed me saying that would you be interested in taking some of your writings from your blog and working with us to create a book out of it. So that's how that happened. I didn't even apply I didn't send my manuscript anywhere or anything like that. So that's how my first book happened, basically. So so it's not a very easy struggle for someone who wants to make a livelihood and a long term career out of writing, basically, especially someone younger,
But
much
then
younger.
after your first book, do you have to knock at their doors and say कि सर मैंने ये किताब लिख ली है, इसको पब्लिश कर दो? Or when does the
Decided
interaction
somewhere.
start?
Yeah, so I did that for the first couple of books, and I did eventually get another publisher for one of those other books. But somewhere after my second book, I decided to self-publish most of my books. For the last five books that I have published them myself.
And how
So I have
self-publishing?
realized that.
I also see Amazon self-publish and whatever else. How easy is it, and what are the biggest challenges to do it?
So I learned that process in the first 2 3 years by working with some of these publishers. There are a certain set of things that you can learn, and I now have a team to do most of those things. Like from your manuscript reviews to editing your first draft to getting a book into formats for print and ebook versions, then having your book covers done, and then actually doing it on Amazon or Apple iBooks or Google Books. I mean, all of that. So there's a technical person to do, technical skills required for doing those kind of things. Then eventually marketing. Marketing is around primarily, press releases, or any book launch events, or maybe signing events, or social media and stuff like that. So if you have certain designated experts and freelancers working with you on that, then it's possible for an author to take some of these, or at least if they want to self-publish. The advantage of self-publishing is that I own all the content. There's no question of any royalty. Nobody takes any pie out of it. I don't need to sell 25,000 or millions of books and get 7% out of it, because I keep 90% of the earnings of the books. Yeah.
So since we are all MBAs here and we have talked about economics, एक वो economics का last question है कि profit कितना होता है? I know you take 90% royalties, but the main thing is कि you've got a team who are doing things, etc. उसका cost कितना है, and where is the break even दैट हैपेंस कि कितना आपको रेवेन्यू बनाना है कि वो टीम का कुछ तो खर्चा निकले, जस्ट ब्रेक इवन।
It's not a very high cost activity for every book. It will probably cost you, even if you take the best of editors and book cover designers and all of that, it will probably cost you, you will probably break even in around 500 copies or so. That's typically where, in fact, in self publishing, it's even lesser, maybe around 200 copies or so, because it doesn't cost you more than 50,000 or 60,000 rupees per book to get it ready if you have the right team with you, which is fairly established with you. And more than the money, it leaves you the freedom for things like translations, adaptations, uh, any other creative upsides to your content. Because when you go through other publishers, then all of that is generally part of your agreement where you lose most of those rights. So anyway, maybe television rights. So rights for adaptation of your stories, or rights for translations into other languages, or even television rights if you want to sell your stories for later OTT or movies and things like that. All of those you own if you go through the self-publishing route. So you leave that upside open for the future, because what typically happens for an author is when one book does well, the general interest in the author increases. Even if even his bad book starts selling better, because his one book has done well. So I mean, of course, it's a waiting game. Nobody knows what will happen, but I just want to keep that open in the future.
No, absolutely. I think what you're doing is really good because uh, आई मीन एक बुक हिट हो गई और उसके बाद 4 मूवीज बन गई। आई मीन द काइंड ऑफ रॉयल्टी दैट हॉलीवुड पेज यू, बॉलीवुड में थोड़ा सा
नहीं
कम
नहीं,
है।
एक बुक हिट हो गई तो हमारा चैनल स्पॉन्सर हो जाएगा।
I'll definitely do that. एक बार हो जाने दीजिए।
आई थिंक अगर हमारा
अभी तो
एक
लिख रहा
वीडियो
हूँ
हिट हो गया तो फिर हम भी कर लेंगे।
मैं। हाँ, बिल्कुल।
बट यू नो
Looking
व्हाट, आई
creative is
थिंक
always below that one
रंजीत,
hit.
आई जस्ट रियलाइज that as we've crossed 5,000 subscribers, and before we were like, when we were a year ago at 100 subscribers, इवन जो हमारे पुराने वीडियोस है ना वो भी लोग देख रहे हैं। अब आई वोंट रियली वांट टू कॉल देम कि हमारे बेकार वीडियोस देख रहे हैं। दे वर लाइक जस्ट, वो किसी के पास रीच ही नहीं पहुंची। नो वन सॉ देम, सो नाउ द न्यू सब्सक्राइबर्स दे समटाइम्स दे सी आवर ओल्डर वीडियोस।
Yes, that's exactly what I was telling that when one book does well, and typically the general interest increases. And it's a funny industry, the creative industry. I mean, I think the same applies for many other things like music, or by YouTube channels, or even painting. I was told that even painters, they keep painting for 20 years, एंड कोई एक पेंटिंग अच्छा ऑप्शन में चला गया तो सडनली पुरानी पेंटिंग में कुछ कुछ नया नया दिखने लगता है लोगों को कि
You're
यार ये
right.
भी कुछ क्रिएटिव था।
You're right.
सो वी डोंट नो। इट्स अभी एमबीए लाइफ में ये सब होता नहीं है, तो मेरे लाइफ में ये पिछले 3-4 साल से ही हो रहा है, तो लेट्स सी हाउ थिंग्स हैपन।
So Ranjit, what next for you then? You've become a publisher. You've been an author for a few years. What next? मतलब
So I
continue this
want to keep
journey?
writing. I want to keep writing, and
Fiction?
fiction, mostly fiction, and mostly short fiction. That is what I want to keep doing. As I said in the first, out of the last 5 years, I also did some freelance consulting in data analytics and AI. I keep doing that from time to time if something interests me, but my large preoccupation is going to be around writing, and hopefully it will continue for a few more years till I can keep myself fit and busy and motivated. That's the goal. Yeah.
You know, India may retirement age might be 58 or 60, but I can tell you, and this is part of my work out here, is that I'm aiming for 100-year life. Not just for myself, aiming, and not just for myself, but also for the population and as much. And that's what I invest in. So 58, 60 for me is like अभी तो आधी जिंदगी हुई है।
Start. Yes, absolutely. And so Hopefully, the path that the creative path typically does not have a retirement age. I mean, one of my favorite authors, Ruskin Bond, will be turning 91 in May. So, and he's still writing, he's still publishing. So, let's see if I can last that long. But at least one step at a time. For the next 3 4 years, at least I want to keep writing my books. I think I have a book coming up next year around stories around trekking and climbing, and that will probably get published next year sometime.
And is that like around people's climbs on Mount Everest and things like that?
So it's not a travelogue. So it's the tentative title of that book is climbing a mountain, and it is both a physical mountain as well as a figurative mountain that most people do. Climbing a mountain is also referring to overcoming something in their life while they are trekking. So the environment and the setting for those stories in that are around trekking, but the real story is the story of the character who's doing the trekking. Yeah.
So, Ranjit, tell us, how is it living in Bangalore nowadays for someone in their early 50s, I would say, or very late 40s?
Yeah.
Up, you must be like just turned 50, correct?
Yeah, I'm running 52.
52. So,
Yeah.
what is it living in Bangalore like? Is it like, do you enjoy living in Bangalore, or the pollution and the traffic just gets too much? Or if you ignore the pollution,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you can create a niche for yourself, which is pretty enjoyable.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, there was a phase a few years back where I had this, you know, thing that maybe you should get out of urban areas and all of that. But I realized that I'm a largely urban person. Most of the motivation for my writing comes from urban settings, urban environments, and I'm fairly okay with living in Bangalore. I mean, the traffic doesn't affect me much because I don't go anywhere in the sense that I write out of a room in my house, and I travel only when I mean, there's some event or some meeting friends and things like that. So for me, it's fine. I think I'm perfectly fine with Bangalore. I think I'm going to be living here for a few years at least. Yeah.
And what is the weather like in Bangalore? Has it become worse? Because at least in when we were there on campus from 1998 to 2000, it was gorgeous weather. Is it still?
Yeah. It's not as good as it used to be. Like even when I moved to Bangalore in 2004 or 2003 4, it was much better, and
Mm,
it's become a bit warmer. The summers have become warmer. These 2 months, April, May,
mm,
are are seeing temperatures that we never saw in Bangalore maybe even 5 years back.
mm,
So summers are getting warmer, but in general, the weather is broadly much better than like living in Mumbai, for example. I lived in Mumbai for 20 years of my first 20 years of my life,
mm.
and it was always hot and sweaty, and those are only two seasons, right? Summer and monsoon. There's no winter there,
But
so
Ranjit,
much better than.
I think Mumbai weather is quite good. मतलब अच्छा होता है, especially if you're like Ville Parle, close to the sea and all that. It's all right.
Not as good as Bangalore, honestly. If you
Mm-hmm.
ask me, in terms of heat, it's much sultrier there because the sea is close and it's much more humid and sultry there uh, than something like Bangalore. So weather-wise, I think I have no complaints.
इसका
Traffic and
इसका
infrastructure is pretty bad. Mumbai and Delhi has much better traffic and infrastructure, I think.
Okay, okay, okay. Vix, I was thinking कि यार इसका बहुत अच्छा ना शॉर्ट बनेगा कि मुंबई बॉय thinks Bangalore is good.
Don't do anything like those TV channels and misquote me, okay?
नहीं मिसकोट हम सिर्फ ना मिसकोट नहीं मिसकोट नहीं लेकिन वो
मुझे
रॉन्ग
फिर डिनायल देना पड़ेगा।
नहीं वो रॉन्ग रॉन्ग ऑर्डर वाले जो कोट्स होते हैं वो सिर्फ हम ट्रेलर में करते हैं.
अच्छा ठीक है।
नहीं नहीं रंजित, देखो, थोड़ी कंट्रोवर्सी क्रिएट करनी पड़ेगी. इट्स नॉट फॉर आवर चैनल, इट्स फॉर सेलिंग योर बुक्स.
कर लो आप जो आपको सही लगे।
बुक्स का भी हम लिंक डाल देंगे एंड या यहाँ पे समवेयर समवेयर हियर आई थिंक वी शुड एनीवेज जोक्स अपार्ट वी विल पुट ऑल योर बुक लिंक्स because if someone is seeing this, let's be honest, I mean, they will hopefully be interested in at least wanting to know more about your books, and maybe some of them will also be interested in buying some of those books or reading them library में या कहीं पर इधर उधर. So yeah, we'll obviously do that. We'll do that. Yeah. I mean, I want to be a publisher. मेरे साथ ना होता है, मतलब when you were talking about urban living, so I am the kind of guy who goes in the London tube या फिर इधर उधर जहाँ पे भी है, और वो जो सामने बैठे हैं ना, पीपल हु आर नॉट टॉकिंग टू यू, और आप आधे घंटे बोर हो रहे हो, देन यू लुक एट अ पर्सन एंड देन कि इसकी बैक स्टोरी क्या है, और वो बैक स्टोरी की इसके घर
Oh,
में कौन है, क्यों है, वो मैं बैक स्टोरी बनाते रहता हूँ. एंड फॉर द लास्ट फ्यू
that's a
इयर्स
good
आई बीन टेस्टिंग
start.
आउट दोस बैक
That's
स्टोरीज विद माई किड्स, कि जब हम
Oh, that's
एज
wonderful.
अ
I mean, that's
फैमिली
how
हम जाते हैं
characters
साथ
and
में,
stories
मैं
happen.
उनको बताता हूँ, देखो
Yeah.
ये जो है ना, ये ऐसे है, ये ना इसका ये लाइफ है, इसकी ये लाइफ है. तो ना बहुत सुनते थे मेरे बच्चे, अभी ना बड़े हो गए हैं, तो अभी बोलते हैं डैड.
Acha. Maybe you don't have the right audience. You should look
हाँ,
at the
वही वही वही.
audiences
तो
outside.
अब, तो जब से उन्होंने वो बोलना शुरू कर दिया ना कि डैड कम ऑन, वो बेसिकली दे वांट टू से शट अप, बट मतलब वो बोल रहे हैं कि चुप हो जा,
Yeah.
कि क्या हमारी हमें पिटवाएगा ट्यूब में. तो तब से मुझे लगा कि यार किताब में लिखता हूँ मैं ये सब.
Hmm. लिख लीजिए आप. Why not? I mean, I think your motivations for the characters on the tube is not a bad starting point.
हाँ, इसी टाइप की चीजें मैं करता नहीं, मैं लिखता नहीं हूँ
And
ना,
yeah, I think
मैं
that the
सिर्फ
name of the
सोचता हूँ
book,
और बताता
Characters
हूँ.
on the Tube, that's a great name, Characters on the Tube. I think
Yeah,
I would,
characters on the tube.
Yeah,
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 that's
or
I mean,
characters
when you were talking
characters
about the
underground or
apartment
something.
2A or something like
Characters on
that,
the
वो मेरे दिमाग में यही उस टाइम पर आया कि यार हाँ, it's the same concept in a way maybe as I
Yeah,
understood, कि कौन
yeah.
लोग
For
हैं,
me,
फिर
the
आप
starting
उसके
point
उसके
of
में मन गढ़ंत अपना फिक्शनल स्टोरी बता दो कि ये ऐसा है, ये ऐसा है.
Yeah, most of what I write is realistic fiction. So most of my starting points are similar to what you said. Characters typically. You know, as I said, there's a cook that comes home, or there's somebody in COVID who's looking for something on rent. You know, those kind of things. So starting point is always that. Of course, the story is the fictional part which comes in the head later. So I always say that starting point you might find similar, but stories are everything imaginary.
चलो ठीक है, अगर मेरे पास कोई स्टोरीज, एक दो शॉर्ट स्टोरीज हुई और मैंने बनाई, आई नो विच पब्लिशर टू गो टू.
Yeah, absolutely. You're always welcome. Yeah.
Well done. Ranjit, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your life journey and your life story, and also your what you're doing and what you're doing next. And I'm pretty sure that everyone who's watching this uh, and who will watch our shorter cuts of the videos, I'm sure they will like it and they will take away some things. I definitely did. So, on that note, thank you once again. This is Migs and Wigs signing off, and we will be back here next week. If you don't already know, we also do our Wednesday and Friday live podcast. Wednesday is only on AI, and Fridays are basically on anything else under the sun. Um ट्रम्प, मोदी, एटसेट्रा एटसेट्रा एटसेट्रा, कुछ भी होता है, हम हमें जो लगता है कि हम बात करते हैं, हम वो बात कर लेते हैं. That kind of a thing. So, and maybe Ranjit, maybe you can be a guest on our AI podcast, one of these coming things, because I think you were there before AI became called as AI.
So yeah, sure, we can definitely explore that. No doubt.
yeah, and I
Absolutely.
think it would be interesting to also have him on the Friday podcast because we have a view from Silicon Valley, a view from London. Getting a view from someone in Bangalore is also very useful. जैसे अभी पहलगांव का अटैक हुआ तो मेरा सिलिकॉन वैली का व्यू है, उसका लंदन का व्यू है. इंडिया में लोकल इंडियंस का क्या व्यू है, यू कैन बी अ वेरी गुड रिप्रेजेंटेटिव फॉर दैट.
All right.
या
Yeah, let's explore that. Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys,
या
and
थैंक
great
यू
talking
रंजीत,
to
वेरी
both
गुड
of you.
टॉकिंग टू यू.
Both of you.
हाँ, चलो बाय.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.